From the start, I'd always believed I was the kind of guy who had life all figured out, or at least knew the parts that mattered most. Growing up, I was surrounded by examples of what I thought was true, unwavering love. My parents, married for over 40 years, were inseparable, and I saw in them what I wanted for myself one day: a quiet loyalty, an unspoken bond that weathered life's challenges without question. And when I met Lila, I thought I'd finally found the missing piece that would give me that same stability, that dream of growing old with someone I could count on for the rest of my life. Lila was unlike anyone I'd ever met. Where I was cautious, she was bold; where I preferred planning, she was all about taking risks and seizing the day. In some ways, she brought a spark to my life that I didn't know I needed, encouraging me to dream a little bigger, believe a little more. It was like I'd found someone who filled in all the blanks I hadn't even known existed. But even as we built a life together, I couldn't help feeling the quiet hum of doubt underneath it all. Was I really enough for her? Would I be able to give her everything she deserved? I wasn't a millionaire or a high-profile success. I was a guy with an average job, a few good friends, and dreams I hadn't quite reached yet. And deep down, there was always this nagging insecurity that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't the kind of man she truly wanted, even if she never said it out loud, and that's where my biggest fear came in. You see, I'd always worried that one day, I'd wake up and find that I wasn't enough for her, or worse, that I'd lose her to someone who had what I didn't: success, status, or the ability to give her the life I couldn't. It was in the middle of this belief bubble, my dreams, fears, and insecurities, that life threw a curveball I hadn't expected. When Lila came home one night with a strange, almost hesitant look in her eyes, I knew something was up. She was holding a letter, and as she explained, it turned out to be a job offer from the other side of the country. A huge opportunity. Her dream job. And to be fair, it was everything she deserved after years of hard work. But in that moment, all I could think was, what happens to us? I was faced with a choice I'd never thought I'd have to make: stay together and try to make it work long distance, or let her go, knowing full well the risk of losing her forever. And right then, I realized just how fragile my belief bubble had been all along. Maybe true love, I thought, wasn't as simple or as unbreakable as I'd once believed. It was then that I felt that sinking feeling, the kind that makes you question everything you thought you knew about love, loyalty, and the future you thought was set in stone. I knew we had to talk, but I couldn't shake the sense that this was a test, one that could change everything we built together. Lila and I had built a life that felt solid. We each had our own routines, our inside jokes, and our quiet traditions that only made sense to us. Friday nights were for takeout and old movies, Sunday mornings were for walking through the farmer's market. It wasn't flashy or extraordinary, but it was ours, and I thought it would last forever. I guess I was content to settle into this predictable rhythm, convinced that love was something steady and unchanging, like the foundation of a house that we'd keep building on year after year. But Lila was a dreamer, and I loved that about her. She had this spark that kept her pushing forward, even when I was content to just stay where we were. She wanted more than just stability; she wanted to chase down her ambitions, and I admired her for it. I think, in some way, I even felt proud that I could support her in her journey. But then came that letter, the one that would throw everything off balance. Lila and I had built a life that felt solid. We each had our own routines, our inside jokes, and our quiet traditions that only made sense to us. Friday nights were for takeout and old movies, Sunday mornings were for walking through the farmer's market. It wasn't flashy or extraordinary, but it was ours, and I thought it would last forever. I guess I was content to settle into this predictable rhythm, convinced that love was something steady and unchanging, like the foundation of a house that we'd keep building on year after year. But Lila was a dreamer, and I loved that about her. She had this spark that kept her pushing forward, even when I was content to just stay where we were. She wanted more than just stability; she wanted to chase down her ambitions, and I admired her for it. I think, in some way, I even felt proud that I could support her in her journey. But then came that letter, the one that would throw everything off balance. When Lila told me about the job offer, I could see the excitement in her eyes. She tried to hold back, to be considerate of what this news meant for us, but I knew how much it meant to her. This was her dream, working with a team she respected, making an impact in a field she loved. It was everything she'd worked for. And as her partner, I knew I should feel happy for her. But all I could feel was the ground slipping out from under me, like our entire world was suddenly on unstable ground. As the days went by, the tension in our home was almost tangible. I wanted to be supportive, but I couldn't shake my own fears. What if the distance became too much? What if, in her new life, she found people who were more exciting, more successful, or, dare I say, more suited to her than I was? It was like facing a future I had no control over, and the unknown was terrifying. We tried to talk about it, but each conversation seemed to bring more questions than answers. Would we try to stay together, or would we have to let each other go? Could I handle the distance? Could she? With each discussion, I felt myself pulling back a little, protecting myself from the possibility of losing her, even though it was the last thing I wanted. And that's when it hit me: love isn't just about shared moments and comfort. It's also about the strength to face change, to adapt, and sometimes, to make the hardest decisions for the person you love. In my heart, I knew what Lila wanted and needed, but I also knew I had my own limitations. And I wasn't sure either of us could live in a world where we were physically apart but trying to keep this love alive. It was like being caught between my biggest fear and my deepest hope, each pulling me in a different direction. The hardest part was sitting down together and trying to make sense of everything. Lila had been so quiet lately, as though she knew we were heading into uncharted territory. Her excitement about the job offer had dimmed, replaced with a sense of uncertainty. And I felt it too, this weight in the pit of my stomach that wouldn't let up, a constant reminder that we were standing on the edge of something we couldn't undo. We were sitting on the couch one evening, the space between us growing with every second of silence. It was a typical Tuesday night, except nothing felt typical anymore. The usual comfort of each other's company had been replaced by an unspoken tension. We'd both been avoiding it, the moment when we had to face the reality of what was happening. Finally, I looked at Lila, and I saw it. Her eyes, usually full of fire and hope, were tired, and a sadness lingered there that she couldn't hide. She let out a soft sigh before speaking. "David, I don't want to hurt you. I don't want to hurt us. But I can't pass up this opportunity. It's everything I've worked for." And there it was, the thing that had been hanging in the air between us for weeks. Her job offer wasn't just a career move, it was a part of who she was, her chance to truly take control of her life and live it on her own terms. I knew this deep down. But I couldn't help the wave of panic that swept over me. "What did this mean for us, Lila?" I said, my voice catching in my throat. "I know you've dreamed of something like this, and I don't want to hold you back. But I can't pretend that I'm okay with you being so far away. I'm scared, Lila. I'm scared that we'll drift apart, that we won't be the same when you come back. Or worse, what if we don't come back at all?" The words felt so heavy in the room, and I could see the conflict in her eyes. I knew she loved me. I knew she cared. But this was bigger than just us now. It was about her future, her potential, her growth. And as much as I didn't want to admit it, I realized that I couldn't ask her to choose me over her dreams. "I don't want to leave you," Lila whispered, her voice trembling. "But I don't know how to stay and still grow. I can't let this chance slip away. Not again." I looked at her, my heart breaking with every word. I had to let her go. In that moment, I knew it wasn't just about distance. It was about her needing to be her own person, to find herself without the constraints of a relationship that was asking her to choose between love and ambition. And for me, it was about letting her go, so she could do just that. "I love you, Lila," I said, the words coming out slower than I wanted. "But sometimes, love means letting go. And if we're meant to be together, we'll find our way back to each other." It felt like the longest moment of my life, that pause between our words. But there was something else in the air, too, a sense of clarity. We both knew that sometimes, to grow, we had to be apart. Sometimes, love isn't about staying in the same place, it's about giving each other the freedom to pursue the things that will shape who we become. And maybe, just maybe, that's how we'd find our way back to each other in the future. I'll always love you, David, she said, tears slipping down her face. And I'll never forget us. And that was it. In the quiet that followed, I understood. We were letting go, but it wasn't the end. It was just a chapter closing, one that needed to happen for both of us to grow. The days after our breakup were harder than I ever anticipated. It wasn't just the absence of Lila's laughter or the quiet in the apartment where we'd once spent so many evenings together. It was the emptiness that came from knowing we had made a decision that was supposed to set us free, but it only made me feel more trapped. I kept telling myself it was the right thing to do. She needed to follow her dreams, and I couldn't be the one to hold her back. But at night, when I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe we'd made a mistake. Maybe there was another way. I kept replaying our last conversation in my head, wishing for a different outcome. I missed her so much, more than I'd expected. It wasn't just her presence I missed, but the connection we had, the shared sense of purpose. Even though I told myself it was over, a part of me still clung to the idea of us being together. I found myself driving past the places we used to go, just hoping to catch a glimpse of something that would bring back the comfort we once had. But each time, I was left with the same sense of longing and confusion. It wasn't just the loneliness that hurt. It was the doubt. Had I made the right choice? Was love supposed to be about sacrifice, or was I just running away from the hard stuff? I wrestled with those questions every day, wondering if we could have figured out a way to make it work. Maybe we could have found a compromise, maybe not. But in the silence that followed, all I had were my thoughts, and they weren't as clear as I wanted them to be. Then there was the pain of seeing other people moving on while I stood still, lost in my own grief. I kept telling myself that Lila was fine, that she was out there, chasing her dreams, and that this was for the best. But it didn't make it any easier. I would wake up in the mornings and realize that there was no one to share the little victories of the day with. No one to tell about the funny thing that happened at work, or the new restaurant I'd tried. And those small moments, the ones I used to take for granted, now felt like they weighed a ton. I told myself it would get easier with time, but the days felt long. Each one was like a quiet reminder of the love we'd shared, and how easily it seemed to slip through my fingers. I tried distracting myself with work, with friends, with anything I could find to fill the void. But nothing worked. There was always that nagging feeling in the back of my mind that something was missing, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it. I think that's when I started realizing something important. This pain, this feeling of loss, it wasn't just about missing Lila. It was about me too. The decision to let go had been hard, but it had also forced me to face parts of myself I had been ignoring. I had to ask myself if I was truly ready for change, whether I could let go of the past and embrace what was next. And more importantly, I had to learn to be okay with being alone, for a while. At least, so that I could become the person I needed to be. The struggle wasn't just about getting over her, it was about finding my own footing again. And I wasn't sure how to do that, not without her. But somewhere deep down, I knew that this was the part of the journey where growth could happen. The pain of this decision, as gut-wrenching as it was, could be the catalyst for something bigger. I just had to let it unfold. Months passed since our breakup, and life, as it often does, moved forward, albeit with a strange emptiness hanging over me. I focused on work, threw myself into social gatherings with friends, and even took up hobbies I had long ignored. But no matter how much I tried to distract myself, there was always a piece of me that felt like I was walking through life on autopilot. The absence of Lila, the life we had shared, lingered like an uninvited guest. Then one Saturday morning, something I never expected happened. I walked into the new coffee shop in town, the one that had opened a few weeks ago. I was just looking for a quiet place to grab a coffee before running errands, but the moment I stepped inside I froze. There she was. Lila. Sitting at a small table by the window, sipping her coffee, her familiar smile lighting up the room like it used to when she talked about her day. For a moment, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me. I hadn't seen her in months, and yet there she was, as real as ever. I don't know what came over me, but my feet carried me toward her before my brain could catch up. She looked up as I approached, her eyes widening in recognition, but also in surprise. "David?" she said, her voice full of disbelief, like she couldn't quite believe I was standing in front of her. It felt like the world around us slowed down as I took in the sight of her again. The ache in my chest that had been there for so long flared up. But this time it wasn't just pain. There was something else, something I hadn't expected to feel. It was like seeing an old friend after a lifetime apart, yet knowing that the connection between us had never really faded. "I didn't think I'd ever see you again," I said, my voice almost a whisper. "How are you?" She smiled, but it was a different smile from the one I remembered. It was softer, more thoughtful, as if she had gone through something significant since we last spoke. "I'm good, actually. Better than I expected," she replied. Then, almost as if she couldn't help herself, she added, "I quit my job." My heart skipped a beat, and I tried to process the words. "You quit your job? Why?" Lila's eyes softened, and I saw a flicker of something deeper there, a resolve, a kind of peace. I realized something. I had been so focused on building a career that I forgot what really mattered. My family, the people I love, this town, they're all part of who I am. And I spent so much time running away from them, thinking I needed to prove something. But I was wrong. She paused, looking out the window, almost as if she were gathering her thoughts. "I came back because I wanted to build a life here. Not just for me, but for the people I care about. I've realized I can have everything I want, but only if I'm true to myself, true to what really matters." I was stunned. The woman who had once been so driven by ambition, so set on carving out her own future, had made a complete shift. She wasn't just chasing a career anymore, she was chasing something deeper, something more fulfilling. I realized in that moment how much we had both changed in the time apart. "So, what now?" I asked, my voice thick with emotion. "Are we?" Lila smiled gently, a sense of peace settling over her. "I don't know," she said. "But I think I'm finally ready to find out. Maybe we can start by catching up." And just like that, in the quiet corner of a small coffee shop, I knew things had shifted, not just for her, but for me as well. The hurt I'd carried for months began to feel less heavy. There was a new sense of possibility in the air. Maybe, just maybe, love wasn't something that could be forced or rushed. It could wait. It could grow. As I sat down across from her, our conversation flowed easily, like no time had passed at all. The years of uncertainty and doubt seemed like a distant memory. For the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: hope. It was a twist of fate that brought us together again, but it was the growth we'd each experienced separately that allowed us to truly see each other. Maybe this time, we would find our way back to one another, not because we had to, but because we wanted to. The days following our unexpected reunion felt like a blur. Lila and I spent hours together, catching up on everything, the trivial things and the important things. We laughed about old memories, shared stories of the people we once knew, and filled in the gaps of the time we'd been apart. It felt natural, easy, like the years of separation had never happened. But at the same time, I felt a shift, a distance I couldn't explain. It wasn't awkwardness, it was more like we were two people who had changed, and the connection we once had was evolving into something new. I spent many quiet nights thinking about it, whether we could really go back to what we had. A part of me wanted to dive in, to embrace the possibility of rekindling our love. But another part of me hesitated, unsure if I was ready to take that step. The world had changed, and so had we. It wasn't just the distance we had once struggled with, it was the person I had become during our time apart. Over the months of our breakup, I had learned so much about myself. I had realized how often I'd been consumed by my fears, how I had let my insecurities dictate my choices. When Lila left, I had thought it was the end of everything. But in truth, it was a beginning, a chance for both of us to grow, to find ourselves. And now, here I was, faced with the possibility of picking up where we left off, but with a deeper understanding of who we were as individuals. Lila had made a bold choice in returning home to rebuild her life, and in doing so, she had shown me something important: the courage to be true to oneself. It was a lesson I needed, even if I didn't realize it until now. But could we really do this again? Could we build a future together, after everything? I had to admit that I was still afraid. Afraid of falling back into old patterns, afraid of getting hurt again. I didn't know if love was enough to overcome everything we had faced. But I did know one thing: when I was with Lila, the world felt more alive. She was the one who had made me feel like I could be more than what I was, like I could grow into the man I wanted to be. I decided to be honest with myself. I needed to trust what my heart was telling me, even if it scared me. I knew it wouldn't be easy. Relationships never were, especially after the kind of distance we'd experienced. But I also knew that nothing worth having ever came without risk, so I called Lila the next day. "Hey, do you want to meet for lunch?" I asked, my voice a little shaky. "I've been thinking about us." The pause on the other end of the line felt like an eternity, but when she spoke, her voice was steady. "I've been thinking about us too, David. I think we need to talk." We met at the same coffee shop where we'd first run into each other, sitting at the table where our conversation had begun to feel like the start of something new. As we sat across from each other, the silence between us wasn't uncomfortable. It was full of possibility. "I don't know where this is going," I said, finally voicing the doubts I'd been carrying. "But I think we owe it to ourselves to explore it. We've both changed. We're different people now. But I don't want to let fear stop me from seeing where this could go." Lila smiled softly. "I've been thinking the same thing. I don't know what's next for us, but I do know that I'm not afraid of trying again." In that moment, everything felt clear. We weren't trying to pick up where we left off. We were starting something new, from the ground up. And that was okay. It wasn't about trying to recreate the past, it was about building something even better. A relationship that was rooted in the lessons we had learned, in the people we had become. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace with my decision. We didn't have all the answers, but we had each other, and that was enough. Starting over wasn't as simple as picking up where we'd left off. Sure, we both wanted it, but the truth was, we had so much more to work through than we had anticipated. I'd learned in our time apart that trust wasn't something you could take for granted. It had to be earned bit by bit. At first, we took things slow. We spent hours talking, really talking, about everything. We dug into the old wounds, the things we never said before, the reasons we had broken up in the first place. There were moments when it felt overwhelming, moments when I questioned whether I could really let go of the past. But each conversation, each small gesture, began to rebuild the foundation of trust that we had lost. One of the hardest things was realizing how much I had changed. The man I had been when we first met wasn't the man I was now. I had grown more independent, more self-aware. But, in some ways, that independence made me hesitant. I had gotten used to being alone, to handling things by myself. Opening up to someone again, especially someone I had once loved, felt risky. What if I couldn't fully trust again? What if the past mistakes repeated themselves? Lila, too, had changed. She wasn't the same woman who had left for her job across the country. She had found her own way, built a life that was strong and independent, one where she didn't need anyone to complete her. Yet here she was, choosing to rebuild with me. It wasn't just the job she had left behind, it was the fear of never being true to herself. And now, she had to trust again, just like I did. There were days when the doubts crept in. Days when we both wondered if we were making the right decision, if our history would continue to haunt us. But then, we would talk. We would remind ourselves that we were building something new, something we had both wanted, together. One evening, after a long conversation, Lila took my hand in hers. Her touch was gentle but firm, a silent promise that she was here, that we were in this together. "We're going to be okay," she said softly, looking me straight in the eyes. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that, despite everything, we could make this work, and slowly I did. Every small step forward felt like a victory. We began making plans for the future, little ones at first. Weekend getaways, trying out new restaurants, taking walks in the park. Each moment was a chance to rediscover the things we had once loved about each other, and the things we had never known before. It wasn't perfect. There were still challenges ahead. Moments where old fears resurfaced. But the difference now was that we were committed to working through them. The mistakes from the past weren't going to define us. They were stepping stones toward a stronger, more honest relationship. We knew the road wouldn't always be easy. But we had something important now, real understanding and a deep desire to grow, both together and as individuals. It was the first time in a long time that I felt truly optimistic about the future, and as we laughed together, shared quiet moments, and simply enjoyed each other's company, I realized that this wasn't about trying to be the same people we had been. It was about embracing the people we had become. This was the start of something even better. It's funny how life works sometimes. You spend so much time looking for answers, trying to make sense of everything, only to realize that the answers were there all along, right in front of you, in the people you've always known. When Lila and I started talking again, I had no idea where it would lead. I didn't expect things to turn out this way, to rekindle the flame of love we had once shared. But here we were, taking things slow, rediscovering each other, and finding a new rhythm, a new happiness. It wasn't the same as before, but maybe that was the point. We had both changed, and in those changes, we discovered something deeper and more lasting. We weren't just picking up where we left off. This time, it felt different. More mature. More secure. More confident. We were no longer two people who thought we needed each other to complete ourselves. We were two people who chose each other, knowing that our individual happiness was as important as the happiness we shared together. There was freedom in that realization, freedom to love without fear, to love with a sense of completeness we hadn't experienced before. I started noticing little things, things I'd missed before. The way Lila laughed at the smallest jokes, the way her eyes sparkled when she spoke about her dreams, the softness in her voice when she told me about her day. Those moments, the simple ones, were now the ones I cherished the most. It was like seeing her for the first time all over again, but this time, I was truly seeing her, all of her. We had learned to appreciate each other's space, to recognize when we needed time to ourselves and when we needed to be together. Our relationship became a balance, one where we didn't just depend on each other for our happiness, but complemented each other's lives in ways we hadn't before. There were no more questions, no more doubts. We knew what we had, and we knew what we were building together. There were no promises of perfection, but there was an unspoken understanding that we were both all in, fully committed to making this work. We were past the point of wondering if we could make it work. We knew we could, because we had already fought for it, and we had already seen what was worth fighting for. One quiet night, as we sat together on the porch watching the sunset, Lila turned to me and smiled. There was a peacefulness in her expression, a sense of belonging that I could feel radiating from her. "I'm happy," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, and in that moment, I realized I was happy too, not because of some grand achievement, not because everything had fallen into place in exactly the way I had imagined. I was happy because we had finally found peace, together and individually. We had learned to love ourselves and each other in a way that made our love stronger, more resilient. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were thriving, and that's when I knew this was what love was meant to be. Not a fairy tale, not something perfect, but something real. Something that had been forged through struggle and healing, through patience and understanding, through letting go and holding on. It wasn't the love we had once dreamed of, but it was better. It was a love that was built to last, one that had been tested and proven. As we sat there in the quiet of the evening, hand in hand, I realized that we had truly found our way back to each other, not because of the circumstances that had brought us together, but because of the love we had built, the trust we had earned, and the happiness we had found within ourselves and each other. It's funny how life can take you full circle, bringing you back to places you never thought you'd return. I never imagined I'd be sitting here, with Lila by my side, after everything we'd been through. But here we are, stronger than before, in a place where we truly understand what it means to love, and to be loved. Our relationship isn't perfect, and it never will be. But we've learned to embrace the imperfections. We've learned that love isn't about finding the perfect person, but about growing together and creating something that lasts. It's about trust, trust that we can weather the storms and face the challenges that come our way. It's about knowing that even when life throws you curveballs, you can always rebuild if you're willing to put in the effort. In the end, I realized that letting go wasn't a failure, it was a necessary step in both of our journeys. By parting ways, we gave each other the space to grow. We discovered who we were as individuals, and when the time came to come back together, we were ready. We weren't the same people we were when we first met, but in many ways, that made us better for each other. Looking at Lila now, I can see how far we've come. We don't have the same fears or doubts that we once did. We've built something solid, something we know is worth fighting for. And when I think about the future, I feel a sense of peace I never thought I'd have. There's no rush, no pressure. We're just living, loving, and growing together. This is the start of a new chapter. A chapter where we don't just exist beside each other but where we thrive, individually and as a couple. We're not the same people who first met, and I'm thankful for that. We're better. We're stronger. And most importantly, we're ready for whatever comes next. As we moved forward, I realized that love, when it's real, isn't about perfection or never facing challenges. It's about showing up for each other, through thick and thin. It's about understanding that sometimes you have to let go to grow, and in doing so, you can find your way back to the person who means the most. Looking back, I see now that all of our struggles, all of our heartache, were part of the process of building something meaningful. And when I look at Lila, I know that no matter what comes our way, we'll face it together, stronger than ever. The love we have now is the love we were always meant to find. And as we walked into our new beginning, side by side, I knew that we had everything we needed, each other, the lessons we'd learned, and the strength to face the future with open hearts.